Hi, this is Dr. Assess. I'll leave it with another episode of the Way to College podcast. I love the podcast because one, it's an opportunity, a platform for folks to share their stories, to share their educational journeys, but also their professional journeys. I think one of the fascinating things for me is learning about the work that folks are doing, how they got there, and what they're doing in that work, right? And so today, I have a very special guest. And as is customary with all of my guests, what I like to do is I like to allow them to introduce themselves. So Sam, why don't you introduce yourself to our listeners out there?
Absolutely. Well, first off, thanks so much for having me on. Sam Bernstein, one of the two co-founders of Loper, which is a free mobile app for high school students, guiding them to the right next step. And to take a step back myself in my own journey. Very fortunate. I grew up in the Bay Area. Went to a nice private Jesuit high school, St. Ignatius College Prep in San Francisco. And in many ways, when I look back at my own process, I was set up in a position where it would have been really, really hard to fail. And that comes from the fact, I had two parents who went to college before me. I had an older brother who went through the process, and I went to a college prep high school, which, you know, I had a great experience there, but they do a great job of making sure you're not missing any milestones on your way from showing up as a clear-eyed freshman in high school to navigating, okay, how do we stay on top of it with grades? How do we start to go through the college process? And from there, I actually, stuck with the Jesuits. I went to Georgetown University out in Washington, D.C. Loved the school. School where there were always some older students from my high school who went there and really fit what I was looking for. But as I look back, I had such an unproductive approach to finding what was next for me after high school, where I was that student who was like, okay, let me go look at what some ranking site tells me are the best schools in the country and start to go down the list and which ones do I want to apply to. And Georgetown wasn't the first school that was on my list. It doesn't show up at the very top of any of those rankings. It does, show up pretty highly up there. And in hindsight, I think as I was wrapping up my time there, I really realized, like, wow, I had friends who went to Ivy League institutions. I look back, I'm like, oh, I actually wouldn't have liked a lot of these schools that, as a junior or senior in high school, I told myself was my dream to show up to. Like, it wouldn't have been enjoyable. What didn't really meet anything that I wanted. And I think fortunate, I met a lot of my best friends. I actually met my co-founder of Loper the very first day of freshman year, which is a fun story that we like to tell, and the value of education. But for myself was something is, really leaving Georgetown. I look back, it's like, oh, this really worked out well for me. It didn't work out because I had a very healthy and productive approach, but so much as, I had a great support system around me and was frankly very lucky in just the schools I got into and chose, what I thought was the best school of the list turned out to be a really good fit for me. After college, I like to tease myself like a good Georgetown grad. I went and worked in finance. So I worked at a hedge fund in New York City called Maverick Capital. Worked with a lot of really nice people, smart people. But I can tell you, after a couple years being there, trading stocks is not something that I want to do for the rest of my life. And it was kind of a nice, and it's weird saying this, a nice timing for the pandemic personally, in the sense of I was a couple years out of college, living in New York City. Pretty much everyone I knew left the city, and it really gave me a chance to take a step back and say, okay, if I don't want to sit on this trading desk forever, what's important to me? Where do I want to spend time? Where do I want to spend my 20s? And I think that we saw a really bright spotlight on inequality during that time, and in a somewhat different way during the pandemic. And I'd say racial inequality, socioeconomic inequality. There's nothing like the experience of stepping outside of my New York City apartment and seeing 14th Street empty and seeing Times Square empty. And it's really myself and in some ways a community of homeless that was out on the streets in March and April. And that was a very visceral experience that stuck with me. And over the next year or so, really left me thinking, hey, where do I want to spend my time? It's how can we help combat what I think is the defining domestic issue of our time, which is socioeconomic inequality, and just kept coming back to education. And I thought back, so I started to look back on my own experience, like, okay, I really had everything set up in place for me. That's just not the case for most students out there. And whether you look at a national student to counselor ratio of 425 to 1, something like 20% of students don't have a guidance counselor. And then as I started to look on the technology side, it's like, wait a second, this is the same exact tools and resources that I had, roughly a decade before this. that my older brother had. I think you go back really 10 years before that, still the same resources in place. And it just left me thinking there has to be a way to improve this process for students. And, for Loper as a business, what I realized is the higher ed recruitment side of the equation is really stuck in this high volume mass outreach approach that lacks personalization for what is really the first major, I'll say, quasi independent decision you're making as a high schooler, and what we view as one of these two massive steps in your pre professional transition. What do I do after high school, and where do I work for my first job? And students just don't have the resources. They don't have the resources that I had, and the technology just did not feel on par with what's available in the 2020s. And then really over the last couple of years starting the company, it just continues to excite me more and more. It's not the technology you can just snap your fingers and fix this for students, but can really empower them and provide a more personalized pathway from high school into that right next step for you. And I really focus on that personalization and the you aspect there, because it really is different for every student, and what aligns with their interests and what level of support they need. It really matters on that one-to-one level.
Oh man, thank you. Thank you for all of that. Thank you for walking us through that. And I'm excited to learn more about Loper, Sam, just because, you know, this is work that your work and what you've described is something that is really hits close to home, something very personal for me. What I want to do before we get there, though, is because you walked us through your educational journey very quickly and talked about growing up in the Bay Area, going to a Jesuit high school, and then both of your parents being college educated. May I ask, young Sam getting into high school, what were your aspirations at that time? Because I know you said, we're going to go to a good school, aspire to go to a good school. I don't know if you wanted to work on Wall Street, if you wanted to pick stocks, but you know, as you're entering high school, what were your aspirations at that point?
Yeah, it's a great question, because I think that it's one of those pieces that it's very easy to look back and say, this is what my freshman year self thought, with the benefit of hindsight and maybe some molding of where I am today. And in looking back, I think that there is the honest answer. I really didn't know what I wanted when I came into high school. I really didn't know. I thought that I knew certain things. Like Wall Street wasn't necessarily a specific interest, but I remember, my best friend growing up, he has twin older brothers who were 10 years older than us. And one of them went and worked in investment banking. One of them worked at a trading desk. I was like, oh, he's making a ton of money in this thing called investment banking. Maybe I want to go into finance, investment banking. I had no idea what it was at the time. I didn't have any idea of what it was, when I was halfway through college and I was interviewing for jobs, or I was telling people it was my passion to go do this. It's like, wait, I barely know what I'm actually applying for. And so I think there were a couple different pieces there where I was, at times like, oh, this sounds really interesting to me. I think there was a high correlation to what sounded interesting to me and what I thought would pay me a lot of money, which, was a priority that I think it isn't necessarily a wrong priority to have, but I think is just one that it's really easy to almost have that measuring stick of income of, oh, higher income means something that I should be aspiring for. So there was a lot of that. But at different points in high school, and one of the things, and maybe not freshman year, but I was really interested in politics, and I still think have a deep interest for really all aspects of politics, both domestic and international relations, one of the things that drove me to Georgetown. But I'll say I showed up in college and realized very quickly, like, wait a second, I do not want to work in politics at all. That is not for me. There turns out that is a very messy, messy industry to be in. So there was, I think I came in, I didn't really know what I wanted, and I would just keep like kind of clinging to different things that I thought were good for me and would bounce around those interests, but there wasn't ever anything. It's almost like a blessing and a curse. I didn't show up and say, I want to be a doctor or I want to be a lawyer. And some of those career paths where it's like, great, if you know you want to do this, there's really a setup next 5, 10 years. It's kind of like I want to do something that I thought mattered. And oftentimes that had income as a measuring stick. And as I think I, grew older, matured, and also ended up going to a field where you do earn a lot of money, I realized, okay, that's actually not the singular guiding post that really matters to me, or that I think people should have, but it's a really easy one to cling to.
It sounds like I think most kids, I think we can agree, right? Most high school kids are probably operating in that space. That's a similar space, right? Where we have some ideas about jobs, we have this a perception of income, and obviously, right, we want to make a little more, and sometimes it's relative to our own parents or upbringing, right? But we there is this idea that the more we make, maybe the happier that we'll be, or we'll achieve some sort of status, right? What is it that, because you said both of your parents were college educated, what is it that your parents did, and was there ever any pressure from mom and dad to do anything in particular?
So this is where, when I say that I am very lucky with the path I had, I actually think where I am most lucky is, I have two great parents, but I have two parents who really just wanted to support me. And I think I saw this with my older brother, and I'll bring this up sometimes in that I was someone where school came easy for me. Test taking was easy, it was natural. Classes, I never really had to spend as much time doing homework as they said I was going to have to. But my older brother is dyslexic. School is not his thing. But I always grew up in a household where it wasn't like, oh, Sam, you got an A on this test. Jacob, you got a B on this test. Sam, you're better than Jacob, because of it was not at all that. It was just like, try hard, do your best. And my brother's the best people's person I knew, and still know today. And it's okay, Jacob's gonna be really, really successful in whatever he chooses to do, and has zero correlation to the grades that he's getting in high school right now and then into college as well. He went to Marquette University out in Milwaukee, and my parents were pumped for him. There's like, I think it's a great spot for you. He had a great time, met a bunch of his best friends. He's doing incredibly well now. And I think that really stuck with me, where my parents were never pushing me, and they sat down there like, look, you're gonna be looking and applying to different schools than Jacob. You may be on a different early career path than him. That's great. Like, just do what you want to do. And I think they never pushed me down a specific path. I think in a weird way that I was always a kid who put more pressure on myself than anyone else. And I think it almost led to me self-selecting, and like, I need to go to the very best school because I'm pushing myself to that more so than my parents. But it was awesome that I was getting college acceptances. Like, okay, you get different scholarships, you go here or there. I remember them sitting down on the couch, just like, Sam, like, you are in a position where you don't have to just go to the school where you have the single best financial aid package. You don't have to go to a school. We're not going to make you stay close to us in California. Um, you're always welcome to come back. You always have that option. Who really knows where things are going to go? But we just want to support you in this process. And like, it was awesome for me as a high school student to have that, and to have that from folks who'd gone through it. And they would point out examples to me of like, hey, this person who who's doing that, do you know what college they went to? It's insert random state school in California. It's like, hey, they didn't go to an Ivy League school. It's not going to matter. My mom is one of the biggest people on like, where you go doesn't matter so much as what you make of that opportunity. And I just don't think that I was appreciative that they weren't, you know, down my throat, like, you need to do this, XYZ. But I don't think I really fully appreciated what that meant and the message they were trying to instill to me until there was a little bit more hindsight. And it's like, wow, that was like very, very special and important that they gave me that space to grow and kind of figure it out on my own, and almost like make some mistakes or have the wrong thought thought process going through college applications and figuring out early career, and allow me to almost like figure it out with my own experience and come back to be like, oh wait, yeah, they were totally right on what they said. And it just took me going through this lived experience to figure it out.
I love that. And I can definitely relate. I think I was fortunate in my parents were the same way. And so there was never really any pressure about where to go or what to do. I think, like you, I put a lot of pressure on myself. So I wanted to go to a big name school, and I wanted to do these things, right. And it's constant. It's a constant battle, I think, with myself. I don't know if you feel this way, but it's certainly with myself. But I feel like it's also allowed me to pursue, I think, a lot of things that have kind of fallen outside of those traditional sort of occupations. And so I absolutely, like you, I think I feel like I've been incredibly blessed. So thank you for sharing that. Thank you know, and you're sharing your relationship with your parents. So you leave Georgetown, you attend Georgetown, leave Georgetown. And is it immediately after Georgetown that you're working on Wall Street?
So immediately after, funnily enough, I interned at Maverick while my junior going into senior years through a Georgetown connection, and I actually didn't think I was going back there full time, but had it, really great experience that summer. They were really clear, hey, we're not hiring anyone entry level, and it was kind of the awesome internship to me. Going back to the early answer on not knowing what to do with investment banking, I remember my first boss, like before the summer internship, I told him like I actually don't really know if I want to work in finance. I'll be honest with you, I don't actually know what these jobs are doing that I'm telling these other interviewers, hey, this is what I really want to do and passion. I'm like, I'm still in college. I've never, worked a full-time job before. And he was appreciative of that honesty and also just said, hey, great, we're going to give you a chance to learn as much as you want this summer and get exposure. And I'd actually thought that I was going to go work in another field. Georgetown pushes people into consulting, and I remember I was going through New York City traveling. He's like, hey, come by the office, I want to talk to you. And it was March my senior year. He's like, look, there's a spot that opened up, we want to hire someone younger, we'd love for you to start in July. And really made that decision more so trusting the people I was working with and just my experience there of, hey, I'm not sure what I want to do 5 years from now, but I think there's a big degree of just figuring out what it's like to work and, be, I'll call it a fledgling adult and stepping into the working world. And that was really what the experience was. So right after college, went and worked at Maverick. And I'll always tell this to students who ask me for career advice. I just think the most important thing first 12 to 24 months is work for someone who has your best interests in heart, and just make this adjustment into, I'll use 9 to 5, not that I was working a little more than a 9 to 5, but work that 9 to 5, see what it feels like, see what actually, because you're never gonna, I think, be in love with what you're doing from the very first day. I think it takes time for that to grow, no matter what you're doing, even if you step into something that turns into your passion. For me, I realized, okay, this actually isn't something that I want to spend decades on after this, but I was so appreciative of that experience.
When did you know I don't want to be doing this work? Was there a moment? Was it a series of moments?
There, it was a series of moments. It really was during the pandemic where I wasn't sure. I had thought maybe it's just that I don't want to be in this specific trading role, and maybe there are other opportunities I want to grow into, or hey, maybe it's just like in a year or two, I know that there will be more opportunities within trading where maybe I have a little more autonomy. Um, Maybe it's that I should be joining a different firm that's going to give me more control and kind of taking that career progression. But there's a series of moments during the pandemic. Funnily enough, and more on the personal side, all my friends left really, except there was a group of 3 friends who are still there in New York City, and they include, I think, 2 of the more cynical people I know in this world, and they would just constantly prod me of like, "You can't say that you can't work at a hedge fund. You can't be a good person and work there." And they, really more a devil's advocate side. And I didn't agree with everything they said, but they just kept prodding me, kept prodding me. It was just forced me to ask a question that then I was asking myself day to day of like, where do I want to spend my time? And I don't think there's anything wrong working a hedge fund where really the objective is to earn more capital for your investors. And we have LPs who are school endowments, who are hospitals, and it's really, I think, honorable to be growing their capital base. But it's like, okay, is this like really giving me some sense of fulfillment? And the answer I kept coming back to was no. And there was a podcast that I listened to. It's called How I Built This, very popular podcast. There's a founder of Impossible Foods, Pat Brown. I was listening to his episode, and the way he was a professor at Stanford, I believe it was at Stanford. He was a professor, he's taking a sabbatical, and he asked himself the question of what's the biggest problem in the world that I can work on solving. And for him, that was addressing climate change through combating factory farming with meat alternative. And I clearly do not have a PhD in anything that will allow me to address that sort of question. But that framework was like, as I was having these conversations with my friends who were just continuing to prod me of, oh, you work in finance, oh, collecting big checks, this is what you want to do. You're just money motivated. That's all you care about, all you care about. And just realizing like, okay, what's the biggest problem in the world that I think I can work on solving? And that's where I just come back. I'm like, I'm staring at inequality in my face every day, and just like a truly a more visceral way than anything I'd ever seen in the States before. And I just kept coming back to education. I think that, the other moments that happened there was looking and kind of doing deep research in my own time, like, wow, you have what I think is still early innings of this shift in higher education where we're challenging the value of a traditional four-year college. And, I don't think four-year college are going away, but I do think alternatives will continue to become more viable and more accessible. And I think a shift from in-person learning to forced online learning. It's like, wait, if we can have innovation and content delivery, what about operations? What about how we think about supporting students in that pathway from high school to college or high school to what's next? What about student recruitment? And it's like, okay, I grew up in a family that always valued education, and I guess why I didn't bring up with my parents is while they were very supportive, they made sure I got the message that your education is going to be the single biggest gift that we give you. And I really internalized that and still believe that today. It's like, okay, where do those things meet? Um, it's that jump for me from high school to what's next. I think early learning years are very, very important, but I also quickly realized I have absolutely no understanding of early childhood psychology or anything that goes in there. So that's not a place I can make impact. And is starting to look at, okay, I just think this system and this process is in many ways broken. I would say in some ways just like convoluted and too confusing for students. And so there's a lot of little conversations and little moments that jump to it. And maybe there's one at the very end that really tipped the scale for me is as you know, in the fall of 2020, as everyone returned to New York City, it was, my friends coming back to the city, starting to have work outings again, and just realizing that what I was prioritizing and where my head was at and where I was spending my free time, like, oh, this is radically different than what my friends are talking and caring about. And that's okay. It just meant that I found something that I really, really wanted to invest my time and energy in. And it's probably time for me to make a shift. And I think your job is such a central piece of your life. And it reached a point where it's like, I can't keep spending all my time thinking about something else. And tell Maverick, who I'm incredibly grateful for everyone at that firm, and be telling them, hey, I'm fully invested in my job there. Because the answer just started to reach a point where that wasn't true.
Sam, thank you. Thank you for sort of walking us through those moments. And so I'm fascinated about the what's next. You mentioned earlier, you said you had access to tools that you saw 10 years before sort of anybody else had. So maybe to walk us through or tell us about the tools that you had access to, given your sort of your position, and then tell us about Loper and what
Yeah.
it is that Loper does for students.
Yeah, and I guess to clarify on that, it was really that look back in the tools that I was using, and I'll pick on Naviance here, kind of your basic college and career readiness software, where it was I was using that 10 years before, and I think I probably logged on twice and was like, okay, wait, this isn't helpful in any way for me. This feels like an early 2000s website that I'm being shown, and I was like, wait, students are using the same thing here, and it hasn't really updated, and it hasn't gotten cleaner, it hasn't gotten fresher. So I think that and that's where it was a little bit of a light bulb moment for me. Like, wait, I went to this amazingly well-resourced high school, and the actual technology that I had access to still felt outdated to me at the time, and certainly feels outdated as we fast forward into the early 2020s. Like, oh, wait, if that's the case for students at SI, what about everyone else that's out there? What about, a larger public school where you can't fall back on having access to a college counselor whenever you want to walk into their office, and there's one counselor for 2,000 students, and you maybe get 10 or 15 minutes. So that was really what stuck with me there. And in terms of that transitional Loper, when I looked at what students had access to, one of the pieces that I saw is initial gap, which is changing and evolving, but there wasn't much that was trying to reach students on mobile. And for better or worse, you got high school students who are spending a lot of time on their phones right now. I think you grow up with a smartphone in your hand. It's very different in terms of your expectation for content curation, personalization, where I'm not saying Loper is in any ways replacing TikTok, Instagram, these great social media feeds. But when I think about what they do and one of their great use cases, like, wow, every time I open that app, it knows what I'm interested in, it knows what I'm cares about. It shows me content based off of that. And there was nothing like that for what I'll say college and career discovery. So in terms of what Loper looks like, it at one point looked a lot more like a dating app in terms of swiping right and left on what you're interested in. We still have that core matching experience, but now it's more of a feed-based social media style where users after creating an account with a chat-based style onboarding where we're really trying to just capture where are you in your process, who at a high level, who are you, what are you interested in, then we can help prioritize content in that feed where users are reacting to what we call prompts. And as they react on this content, some of it's general introspection, some of it's multiple choice, some of it's mini games, there's video content in there, some of it's content coming from colleges themselves. As you react to all of that, that powers our matching algorithm. And that's where that dating app analogy still holds true where as you react to what you're interested in, we deliver you matches. We can actually tell you, hey, here's why we match you with this pathway. It's predominantly for your colleges today, but starting to expand into two-year colleges, trade schools, apprenticeship offerings, an area we're really excited to grow into. And as you match with those schools, you can react them, save them to a list, do more research on those schools within the mobile app, and then a area where that we're really excited to be rolling out right now after a beta last year is actually then a web-based extension. And I think it's where mobile falls short is the actual logistics of the process. We want to make it really easy. So in 5 to 10 minutes, we can learn about what you're interested in, help you build that personalized list. Now, let's say for our seniors in high school, right now juniors entering your senior year in the fall, you actually have to manage the logistics of the process and start to apply. We want to build a personalized plan for you and then actually give you that launching point where you can see all the application requirements in one place and then start to track and go through that process. It feels like there wasn't quite that connective tissue from initial, building a list to actual application and streamlining that process for students. So we're starting to invest more in there, but where we really leaned in was how can we go from that student who's like, I don't really know anything about college or anything I'm interested in, just make it really easy and accessible for them to start exploring in what we view as a very stress-free way, and then actually get that gratification of, oh, here's a match, and here's something I'm interested in, and this product in Loper is telling me here's why we think it's a good fit. That we just didn't see out there, where it's very much generalized content. For me, it was what are those top 25 schools in the country according to an arbitrary list? But oftentimes it's just, hey, I want a large school in the Midwest, and show me 75 matches. And then it's on you to figure out if it's actually interesting for you. We want to do that work and get closer to that, I'll say like magical moment of like, wow, this blank college sounds amazing. Because I think getting to that first step is what's so hard for high school students when it just feels like the weight of the world's on you and it's too stressful and you don't even know where to start. And then you get a big group of students who wait until the last possible minute. And unfortunately, you're just so much more likely to end up making what can be a very consequential decision that is more of a snap decision, has downstream impacts for you, whether it's taking out too much student debt, whether it's going to school and needing to transfer and having credit loss due to transferring, whether you decide, hey, this isn't right for me, and I'm not going to be doing anything after high school and I'm just entering the workforce, and hey, that's okay, but we want to at least give students the ability to explore what those options are.
One, I love it. I mean, I think I love the dating app idea, um, but I think also being able to curate, right? Um, Students based on interest and what they're looking at. So it sounds like, I mean, you mentioned TikTok, you mentioned Instagram, some of these other social media sites. It sounds like what it does is it really curates and kind of filters out a lot of the other noise so that it is truly focused on college career readiness for sort of just post high school, right?
Yeah.
What comes next. So if students, how does this work? Students just download the app, or is it does the school have a contract with you, or how does this work?
Yeah, so it's free mobile app for students. You just need to go to the App Store or the Google Play Store and go ahead and download the app. And if you're interested in learning more, you always check out our website. We've got kind of more information on the product as well as, for counselors in the school side. We don't have any dedicated counselor facing software, but we do have a group of counselors who uh, really encourages use of Loper for that early exploration. I think that's the big use case on the school side that we see, where it's, hey, how do you actually get students to start to engage with the process? And when I talk with counselors, it's, you think about that first meeting that a high school counselor might have with a student. In some cases, it's the only meeting, and it can be pulling teeth to talk to a 16, 17-year-old of, well, what are you interested in? What do you want to do? And then they freeze because they haven't really thought about it. They're stressed. And use Loper as a starting point, and we actually auto generate PDFs based on a student's interests and what their school list is, so they can text, email, any form of messaging platform, send that to a parent or a counselor. So we'll have counselors who use that PDF and say, okay, great, like now I've kind of got this quick checklist, I've taken 2 minutes, and then it's a starting point for the conversation. So that's where we see the use in schools very often, is just using Loper to kickstart this conversation, hopefully get students more excited in the process. But we want to design a product that you know you can use whether or not you have access to a high school counselor, whether or not, heck, you're, no matter where you are in the US, you could be a rural school, an urban school, and have a personalized experience for you. So it's as easy as just going on the App Store, downloading, searching Loper, downloading, and checking it out yourself.
I love that. I love that, Sam. To date, any idea how many students are using Loper?
We have had now more than 200,000 students create accounts. So, that's really in the last like 2.5 years where we're seeing the growth. So that's been really fun for us. It's kind of this classic startup, I'll say, challenge is that I end up seeing 200,000. Tell me 2 years ago 200,000 students, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's the most in the world. Now I'm like, well, how do we get to 300, 400, 500,000? So it's always, you're caught on that treadmill in one way or another. But really, really proud. Students from all 50 states have used the app, and I think for me, it's the 200,000 number is really special. But 4.8 stars in the App Store is something I have learned the hard way is not very easy to get to. So we're proud of that, but it's the individual stories that we'll get from students. And at different points, we've had a student advisory board and an ambassador program, and just getting that feedback from a high schooler of, I never knew that I could say I was interested in blank and it would matter with how I approach this process. Or I had never heard of blank school and I absolutely love it. It's top of my list and I want to apply there. I learned about it on Loper. Like those little moments are really, really special for me in a way, actually much more so than that headline number, because it's why I wanted to work in this space and why I get so much fulfillment from it is you can just have unspeakable amounts of impacts when you're talking about individual students and what that can mean for themselves, for their families, really the transformative power of education. So we've had some great reach in the country as a whole, hoping to continue to grow, but just knowing like there are students out there who have told us that Loper has completely changed their process and their trajectory has been really, really special. And I'd say affirming in hearing that.
Congratulations. When I know how difficult it is, right, to get to that number, the 200,000, but then also the 4.8 stars. It sounds though like Loper is really gives students, it empowers students because I can't tell you. So Sam, I've been working um, in the college space, in the college transition space now for, this is year 23 for me.
Wow. You've got
And
me beat. You've got me beat by a few.
well, but I think we see the same thing. I think we see a lot of young people with kind of a very narrow perspective of what it is that they can do. There's so many careers out there, so many possibilities, so many opportunities, but I think they see a limit. They see like, I can do maybe these five things, um, but have never really been given the tools to truly explore. Right? They rely on that conversation, and as you said, it's sometimes like pulling teeth. Why? I mean, this is what I know. This is what I see immediately around me, and so, but give me a tool where I can explore and spend some time really thinking about it, looking at it. All of a sudden, I see a lot more doors open for me.
Yeah.
And so congratulations for that, because it sounds like it's a fascinating tool. Um, I'm excited to look at it and play with it a little bit. And so, um, if I wanted to do that, could I download the
Yeah,
local?
you absolutely, anyone can download the app, and I'd say is when creating an account, we'll ask you if you're a current high school student. You're gonna have the exact same experience if you say that you're a parent or a counselor, or just I think the last option is probably other on there, as I need to think back our high school on our onboarding process. It's really, I'd say the mobile app is designed for students, but we recognize, 'cause we get that question all the time. It's like, well, I'm not a high schooler, can you use it? And for us, like, oh, absolutely. It's a free mobile app. Anyone can go download and use it. But we wanted to make sure at the start of the journey that, you can express that you aren't currently a high schooler, but fear not, you'll have that exact same experience as a student. And no, we always love getting feedback on the process. One thing I've learned as well is when you looked at an app, more times than I can count, it's just certain things you feel are really intuitive. You're like, oh, this is how we've always done it, so it must be the right way. And I cannot tell you, just like speaking with current high schoolers or even people like yourself who are so familiar with the process, the things that we catch that we've missed because of that, really are invaluable to continuing to improve the product in the long run.
I love that. Sam, thank you. Thank you for your time today. Thank you for sharing all of this information. Thank you for telling us about Loper and how your own journey led to the work that you're doing now. Sam, as we transition out, I always ask my guests, if you had to leave our listeners and our viewers with one last piece of advice, what advice would you like to leave them with?
I only get one here, so I got to make this count. Um, I think my advice here is like it will sound funny, but I sometimes tell myself like time is long, and like time is long, and where I say that is it just feels sometimes where you have to do everything all at once. You have to have all the answers. You don't. It's a long process thinking about that journey from high school to post secondary, and there's just you don't really know how things are, and I think sometimes you just like the stress compounds, and just remembering like it's a long process. You're not making a decision today that is going to affect your future. You got time to make that decision. You have time to go through this process. You may show up in a college in the first week, think that I hate it, this is the worst place. Give it a chance, give it a couple weeks, give it a few months. And I think that holds true in early career too, on the point that I made earlier of just and I think it's just partially because I've spoken to some folks earlier in their career right now who are really unhappy with their jobs and feeling lack of fulfillment, and that may be true, but I always tell them like, give it a little bit longer. Like it's okay. It doesn't have to be the best thing in this moment all the time. So my advice kind of at the end is time is long. You don't know where things will be or how they'll feel a week from now, a month from now, a year from now. And if you sit there and keep coming to the same conclusions, like great, that's your signal. But give it a little bit time. Give it a little bit of time. See how it shakes out.
Sam, I love that. I appreciate the advice. I think it is incredibly timely, given our conversations, and in particular, given some of the conversations I've had with students recently. So thank you. Um, Sam, thank you again for your time. Thank you for your story. Again, congratulations on Loper. I'm excited to get into it and to look at it, and happy to share, with folks in my network and anyone else I can tell about it. So, Sam, thank you
Amazing.
again.
No, and thank you so much for having me on. I really enjoyed it.
All right. This concludes another episode of Way to College podcast. Thank you to my guests. Thank you to all of our listeners and viewers out there. Please remember to subscribe, rate, share, all of that good stuff. And do me a favor and please share the podcast with one other person. I'd appreciate it. We'll talk again soon. Bye bye.